This story is based on a true story from Reddit. I never saw it coming. If someone had told me at the start of 2018 that my life would be torn apart by the woman I loved, I would have laughed it off. Our relationship seemed solid. Sure, we had our rough spots, but who didn't? She was my first real girlfriend, my first everything. I thought she felt the same way about me. That night, everything changed. I was out with some friends, nothing wild, just a low-key hangout that I almost didn't go to. For some reason, I felt off that day, a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, as if something terrible was lurking just beyond my sight. I couldn't shake the feeling, so I called it a night early and headed home. When I walked through the door, the apartment was silent. No lights, no signs of life. The weird feeling grew stronger, but I convinced myself it was nothing. She was probably out with friends or running late at work. I settled onto the couch, grabbing my phone to kill some time until she got home. Then I heard it, a muffled laugh from the bedroom. I froze, heart pounding as a million thoughts raced through my head. Maybe she had friends over? Maybe she was on the phone? But the uneasy feeling in my gut intensified. Something was wrong. I needed to know what was going on. As I walked down the hall, the muffled sounds grew clearer. Her voice, a soft laugh, and then something else. A man's voice, low and hushed. I gripped the door handle, feeling my knuckles turn white, and threw the door open. Time seemed to stop. There she was, tangled in the sheets with some stranger, her body pressed against him in a way that should have been reserved for me. But that wasn't the worst part. She was filming it, her phone positioned on the nightstand, capturing every degrading detail. My chest tightened as the betrayal sunk in. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. She was recording it. This was a premeditated act, something she'd planned and carried out without a second thought about me, about us. I felt sick, my heart splintering into 1,000 jagged pieces. They didn't notice me at first. I must have looked like a ghost, standing there in stunned silence, unable to breathe, unable to move. But when she finally looked up and met my eyes, her face went pale. She tried to pull away, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets, but it was too late. The damage was done. I don't remember what I said, only that I turned and left the room, slamming the door behind me. My ears were ringing, my vision blurred as I stumbled through the apartment, her voice faintly calling after me, pleading for me to stop. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a punch. I barely made it to the sidewalk before collapsing onto a bench, my mind a whirl of disbelief, anger, and raw, searing pain. She'd been my first everything, the woman I'd given my heart to completely. And this was how she repaid me. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind replaying the scene in agonizing detail. Her face, her laughter, the way she looked at him. The betrayal settled in my bones, and a cold, dark determination took root. This wasn't going to end like this. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even make it back to the apartment. Instead, I found myself wandering the streets, numb and lost. I was drowning in a storm of emotions, each one crashing into me harder than the last. Shock, anger, humiliation, and an unbearable sadness. How could she do this to me? How could she tear apart everything we had built without a second thought? The city was quiet, the streetlights casting eerie shadows as I drifted aimlessly. Around dawn, I found myself at a park bench and collapsed, staring into the gray light of morning. For hours, I just sat there, wrestling with myself, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. I could only replay the scene in my mind, again and again, as if watching it from above, detached and helpless. It was around then that the thought first crossed my mind. Revenge. I'd always been the type to let things go, to forgive, even when I probably shouldn't have. But this was different. She didn't just hurt me. She destroyed me. And as much as I wanted to move past it, I couldn't. I couldn't let her get away with it. The following days were a blur. I returned to the apartment only to grab the essentials, avoiding her at all costs. I crashed at a friend's place, but even there, I could barely function. I called in sick to work, but eventually, my boss found out the truth and suggested I take a leave of absence. "You need time to heal," he said gently, but he didn't understand. Healing was out of reach. My only focus now was the unbearable weight of betrayal. Depression wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, dragging me down further each day. Sleep was impossible. The rare times I managed to drift off, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, haunted by images of her and that stranger. I started skipping meals, ignoring texts and calls from friends, sinking deeper and deeper into isolation. I couldn't imagine a way out. Finally, one day, I snapped. I couldn't live like this. I had two choices, sink or swim, and sinking was not an option. If I couldn't pull myself back together emotionally, I would at least rebuild myself physically. The gym became my sanctuary. It was the one place where I could funnel all the anger, all the frustration, all the sadness that had been tearing me apart. The first few weeks were brutal. Every muscle ached. Every joint felt strained to the breaking point. But somehow, it was exactly what I needed. With each set, with each lift, I could feel myself reclaiming a piece of the power she'd stolen from me. I pushed myself harder and harder, channeling everything I had into transforming my body. By the time summer rolled around, I barely recognized myself. The man in the mirror was strong, lean, and disciplined. I'd stripped myself down to my rawest form, shedding every weakness I'd once carried. It was more than just a physical change. It was like I was rebuilding myself from the inside out. But the gym wasn't enough. I still couldn't shake the image of her, that look in her eyes when she saw me standing there, watching her with someone else. I thought I had taken all the steps to move on, but I still felt hollow, incomplete. I needed something more. That's when the idea hit me. If she had destroyed my peace, I'd rebuild it my own way, with a new passion, one that would remind me of who I was before her, one that would fill the emptiness she'd left behind. And that's how I found my way to filmmaking. The world of film had always fascinated me, but I'd never pursued it seriously, not until now. It became an obsession, an outlet to express everything I was feeling, the anger, the sorrow, the frustration. I poured myself into studying every aspect, from lighting to editing, from sound design to storytelling. And slowly, the pain started to fade, replaced by a burning passion I'd almost forgotten I had. I started a YouTube channel, sharing my work with anyone who'd watch, and soon enough, it began to grow. People were connecting with my stories, with the rawness I put into each video. And for the first time in months, I felt alive again. The channel grew faster than I could have anticipated, and with it, my confidence. The more I created, the more I felt like myself again. Or maybe like a new version of myself, someone stronger, sharper, someone who couldn't be hurt so easily. Then, just when I was starting to feel whole again, she came back. It was a simple message, just a few words, as if we hadn't been torn apart by betrayal. Hey, long time no see. I heard you're doing some incredible things in film. Would love to catch up sometime. My heart skipped a beat, and I immediately hated myself for it. After everything she'd put me through, after all the pain and sleepless nights, a part of me still reacted to her. A part of me still wanted to see her. But this time, things would be different. I wasn't the same man she'd left broken in that bedroom. I was someone else now, someone who had clawed his way out of the abyss she'd thrown him into. And if she thought she could just waltz back into my life without consequence, she had another thing coming. I stared at her message for what felt like hours, my finger hovering over the screen as my mind raced. She had the nerve to reach out to me after everything she'd done, as if we could just pick up where we left off. Part of me wanted to block her, erase her from my life once and for all, but another part, a stubborn, damaged part, wanted to know why she was back. Why now? Was she sorry? Did she even know the hell she'd put me through? In the end, curiosity won. I replied with a simple, "Sure, let me know when you're free." The next night, I found myself sitting across from her at a dimly lit cafe, my hands clenched under the table as I tried to keep my emotions in check. She looked almost exactly the same warm eyes, same smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But now, that smile felt like a knife twisting in my gut. She started with the small talk, easing her way into the conversation, avoiding the topic we both knew hung heavy in the air. But I couldn't play along. I couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. "So, why did you reach out to me?" I asked, cutting her off mid-sentence. My voice was sharper than I intended, and she flinched, her smile faltering. She took a breath, her gaze dropping to the table. I don't know, honestly. I heard you were doing well. I guess I wanted to see for myself. I laughed bitterly. Wanted to see if I survived, you mean? Or maybe if I'd still be waiting around for you? She looked up, eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite read. Regret? Shame? Whatever it wasn't enough. No, that's not it. I've missed you, she said softly, reaching across the table for my hand. Instinctively, I pulled away, but my heart betrayed me, beating faster as I felt the warmth of her hand. I forced myself to stay composed. Miss me? After what you did, you expect me to believe that. She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I made a mistake, okay? A terrible, stupid mistake that I regret every day. I was going through a lot, and I wasn't thinking clearly. But I never stopped caring about you. A spark of anger flared in me, the memory of that night still vivid in my mind. You think that excuses it? You don't just accidentally end up in bed with someone else, recording it like it's some kind of sick joke. She winced, and I saw her swallow hard, her eyes watering slightly. I know. I can't change what happened, but I'm trying to make amends. I want to fix things between us, if there's any chance at all. I was silent, the weight of her words pressing down on me. It would be so easy to let her back in, to slip into the comfort of familiarity. But there was a part of me that wanted to do anything but forgive. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain she'd put me through. And in that moment, a plan began to form. A plan that would remind her of what she'd lost and make her regret every choice she'd made. I took a deep breath, forcing a calm expression as I met her gaze. Maybe, I said slowly, as if considering her words, but it's going to take more than just words. She nodded eagerly, hope flickering in her eyes. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please give me a chance. I leaned back, my face an unreadable mask, even as my mind raced with possibilities. I'd let her think she had a shot. I'd let her believe that she could worm her way back into my life. And then, just when she thought everything was falling back into place, I'd make her feel what it was like to be shattered. In the days that followed, I kept up the charade, letting her back into my life slowly, cautiously. She was eager to please, to prove that she was serious, and it almost made me sick to see how desperate she was. But I had to keep my emotions in check. I couldn't afford to slip. This had to be perfect. We started meeting up more often, grabbing coffee, going for walks in the park. Each time, I kept a careful distance, letting her feel the tension between us, making her work for every scrap of attention I gave her. She'd try to reach for my hand, brush her fingers against my arm, but I'd pull back, watching as her face fell each time. And I could see it, the regret, the frustration, the longing. She was starting to feel the pain, the uncertainty, the rejection. One night, we went out to a fancy rooftop bar downtown. She wore a sleek black dress, her hair swept up, looking like a vision of the woman I'd once loved. As we sipped our drinks, I could see her eyes lingering on me, the way they used to, filled with warmth, with something close to desire. Tonight's been really nice, she murmured, leaning in, her lips inches from mine. I held her gaze, letting the moment stretch out, feeling the anticipation between us. Just as her eyes began to close, I turned away, acting as if I'd seen something across the bar. She looked startled, hurt even, but she quickly masked it with a smile. But I knew. I'd gotten to her, and it felt good, almost too good. As the weeks went by, I kept stringing her along, giving her just enough hope to keep her around, to keep her guessing. She started texting more, asking if we could spend more time together, if I'd consider giving her a second chance. And each time, I'd respond with a calculated mix of distance and warmth, letting her feel like she was getting close, only to pull away again. But the more time I spent with her, the more I found myself slipping. There were moments, fleeting but real, where I could feel that old connection creeping back in. The way she'd laugh at my jokes, the way she'd smile at me like I was the only person in the world. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive, to let myself fall back into her arms. But I couldn't, not after what she'd done. Every time I felt myself getting soft, I'd remind myself of that night, of the way she looked at him, the the way she laughed with him. And I tightened my resolve, reminding myself of the plan. The revenge plan was simple, but it required perfect timing. I knew I had to let her think she'd won me back. Let her feel secure, like things were finally returning to normal. Then, at the peak of her comfort, I'd pull the rug out from under her, leaving her with the same shattered heart she'd left me with. The day finally came when she asked if we could make things official again, to get back together for real. She looked at me with that hopeful expression, her hands clasped together, as if she was scared of my answer. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony of it, but I kept a straight face, giving her a small nod. "All right," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let's give it another shot." Her face lit up with a joy I hadn't seen in a long time. She leaned forward to kiss me, and for the first time in months, I let her. I let myself fall into it, the familiarity, the warmth, the way she felt like home. It made my heart ache with a strange mixture of nostalgia and bitterness, but I didn't let myself sink too deep. I couldn't forget why I was doing this. From that moment on, we were officially back together. To everyone else, it seemed like a love story reborn, the tale of a couple finding their way back to each other after a rough patch. But to me, it was just the setup to the endgame. I made sure to play the part perfectly, treating her to dates, surprising her with little gestures, doing everything I'd once done for her, all while keeping my real intentions hidden. When we were together, she'd always mentioned wanting to travel, see new places, experience new things. She'd even show me pictures of dream destinations and adventures she wanted to take someday. So, I decided to plan a trip, something extravagant and romantic, a place we could disappear to where everything felt magical and real. I knew it was the last thing she'd expect, and that was precisely why I chose it. "Let's go to Greece," I told her one night over dinner, a glimmer of excitement in my voice. "Just the two of us? I know you've always wanted to see Santorini." She nearly choked on her wine, her face lighting up in surprise. "Are you serious? Just you and me in Greece?" "Yeah, let's make it a trip to remember." The words dripped with a hidden meaning that only I understood. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I played the role of the doting boyfriend to perfection. I even planned out the itinerary, finding the most romantic spots, the most breathtaking views, everything that would make her feel like she was living a dream. And all the while, she was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Santorini was everything I'd imagined and more. Sunsets over the Aegean, whitewashed buildings clinging to the cliffs, the sea stretching out in every direction. We wandered through the narrow streets, hand in hand, just like a couple on the verge of a new beginning. But for me, this was the beginning of the end. On our final night, I arranged for a private dinner on the terrace of our suite, overlooking the ocean. The sun was just beginning to set, casting everything in shades of pink and gold. I could feel the tension building in my chest, knowing this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I was going to end this once and for all. She looked at me across the table, her eyes warm, her smile soft. "This has been everything, truly," she whispered, reaching across to take my hand. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful." The words almost broke me, a flicker of doubt passing through me. But I remembered the betrayal, the anguish, the emptiness. No, I couldn't let myself falter now. I pulled my hand away, looking at her, letting the silence stretch between us. "Do you really think I could just forgive and forget?" My voice was cold, the mask slipping, revealing the hurt, the anger that had festered for so long. Her face fell, confusion flooding her eyes. What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my voice low and laced with bitterness. "Do you think I forgot that night? Do you think I could ever erase the image of you with someone else? After everything we had, everything I gave you, you threw it all away. And now, you think a few pretty words and a trip could undo that." She went pale, the realization dawning on her as the truth hit like a punch to the gut. "But I thought you forgave me." "Forgave you?" I laughed, a hollow, empty sound that echoed in the quiet. "This whole thing has been a lie, just like the lies you told me. I wanted you to feel what it's like to lose something you thought you had forever. I wanted you to feel the fear, the uncertainty, the pain that you made me live with for months." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her face twisted with shock and devastation, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't understand. Why would you do this?" "Because you deserve it," I said, my voice as cold and unyielding as the stone beneath us. "You deserve to know what it's like to be betrayed, to be left wondering if you were ever good enough. This trip, this moment, it was never about us. It was about me finally taking back the power you stole from me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and I watched as her shoulders sagged, the weight of it all crashing down on her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely able to meet my gaze. "I'm so sorry." I stood, looking down at her one last time. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but I forced it down. She didn't deserve that from me. "Goodbye," I said, walking away, leaving her alone on that terrace as the sun sank into the ocean, taking with it the last traces of what we once had. The flight home was strangely quiet. I felt an odd mixture of relief and emptiness, as though a part of me had finally been put to rest. I had thought that getting revenge would heal me, would make everything better. But as I looked out the airplane window, watching the endless clouds drift by, I realized that nothing could truly erase what had happened. Back home, life resumed its quiet rhythm. I returned to my routine, back to the gym, back to my film projects. My YouTube channel continued to grow, and I poured myself into my work, determined to build something meaningful from the rubble of my past. But late at night, in those quiet, still moments, a part of me felt hollow, as if the revenge I'd taken had only deepened the wound instead of healing it. One evening, as I was reviewing footage for my latest project, a thought hit me, a question that had been lurking in the back of my mind since that night on the terrace. Had I gone too far? I had made her suffer, yes, but at what cost? In the process of trying to hurt her, I had become someone I barely recognized. Someone cold, unfeeling. Someone willing to manipulate and hurt to feel powerful again. In the weeks that followed, I wrestled with that question, trying to reconcile the man I had become with the man I used to be. Weeks passed, and life continued in its quiet way, but something had shifted in me. I had thought that revenge would bring me closure, that it would be the key to moving forward, but now it felt like a hollow victory. The rage, the bitterness, the deep sense of betrayal, they had all faded, replaced by an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. And in that emptiness, a difficult truth emerged. I had lost myself just as much as I'd lost her. The man I had become was cold, untrusting, guarded. The pain she'd inflicted had twisted me, turning me into someone who sought to hurt rather than heal. And while I'd succeeded in making her feel the devastation she'd caused me, I couldn't escape the feeling that I'd crossed a line, one I couldn't go back from. I found myself spending long hours at the gym, pushing my body to the limit, trying to escape the storm of thoughts that kept circling in my mind. But it wasn't enough. There was no release, no relief. The ache that I thought revenge would cure still lingered, gnawing at me, reminding me that nothing had truly changed. One night, after a grueling workout, I sat alone on a bench in the empty gym, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The person staring back at me was unrecognizable. I was in the best shape of my life, my body honed and sculpted to perfection, but inside, I felt hollow, like a shell of the person I used to be. It was as if I'd spent all my energy trying to erase the pain, without realizing that in doing so, I'd erased parts of myself, too. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, I was still holding on to her. Not to the person she was, but to the anger, the pain, the betrayal. I had let those feelings define me, fuel me, turn me into someone I hardly recognized. And it was then, sitting alone in that gym, that I realized what I had to do. It was time to let go, not just of her, but of the person I'd become because of her. The person who held on to anger, who sought revenge, who was driven by the need to hurt rather than to heal. If I was ever going to find peace, I had to let go of all of it. The anger, the bitterness, the need for revenge. I had to forgive, not for her, but for myself. The next day, I went to the beach just before sunrise, the air cool and fresh, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange as the sun crested the horizon. I sat there in the sand, watching the waves crash against the shore, letting the sound wash over me, cleansing me of everything I'd been holding on to. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would move forward, not because of her, but in spite of her. I would build a life rooted in strength and resilience, not in the need to settle old scores. I would let go of the anger, the resentment, and start living for myself, not for the ghosts of a love that no longer existed. Returning to filmmaking became my way of creating something meaningful, something that reflected the lessons I'd learned through all the pain and heartbreak. I channeled my energy into my projects, exploring themes of forgiveness, healing, and growth, sharing stories that resonated with others who'd faced their own struggles and come out stronger on the other side. My audience grew, and with it, a community of people who had walked similar paths, who understood the complexities of love and loss, betrayal and forgiveness. Months passed, and gradually, the emptiness inside me began to fill, not with anger or bitterness, but with a quiet, steady strength. I was learning to trust again, to open myself to the possibility of connection, of love, without the fear of being hurt. It was a slow journey, but I knew it was the only way forward. Then, one evening, as I wrapped up a shoot, I met someone. Her name was Rachel. She was working as a sound engineer on one of my projects, and from the moment we met, there was a quiet, easy connection between us. She was thoughtful, kind, with a passion for her work that matched my own. There was no drama, no tension, just a genuine understanding and mutual respect. It was different, refreshing, and for the first time in years, I found myself feeling hopeful about the future. Rachel and I took things slow, letting our friendship develop naturally. She knew about my past, and instead of pity, she offered understanding. She reminded me that love could be kind, that it didn't have to be a battlefield of broken promises and shattered hearts. With her, I felt like I was rediscovering parts of myself that I'd long buried. Laughter, trust, even vulnerability. One night, as we walked along the beach, she turned to me, her eyes searching mine. I can see that you've been through a lot, but there's so much strength in you too. Don't ever lose that. Her words stayed with me, and in that moment I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to move on. Not with a heart full of revenge or regret, but with a heart that had healed, that was open to the possibility of love again. Looking back, I knew I'd made mistakes, that I'd let anger consume me in a way that nearly destroyed me. But I had survived. I had come out on the other side stronger, wiser, and more aware of who I was and what I wanted. The journey had been painful, but it had also been necessary. It had shown me the importance of letting go, of choosing forgiveness over revenge, of building a life rooted in love and purpose rather than in bitterness and pain. And as I walked hand in hand with Rachel, the ocean stretching out before us, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The past was behind me, and for the first time, the future looked bright. Thank you for joining us for this touching journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. We hope it resonated with you, even brought a little inspiration. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions in the comments. Feel free to share your own experiences or let us know what kinds of stories you'd like to see next. Thanks again for your support. Until then, take care and stay tuned for more great content. Bye-bye.